do you want the abundant life that Jesus offers? It's a free gift, but it comes at a high cost. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. That's how we receive the abundant life that Jesus wants to give us. I remember the first time I kind of tasted that myself, a small taste, I guess you could say. I was in college, and it was about 2005, and I had discerned that God was inviting me to apply for the seminary. Now, in some ways, that seemed like an honor, right? It's an exciting thing. I'm nervous about seminary, but I'm enthusiastic about it, and perhaps what this might mean is a life as a priest. But the awkwardness of 2005 was in those few years leading up to that, all over the headlines in the country was priest abuse scandal. Everywhere. I remember applying for seminary while I'm in college and sitting at breakfast one day reading a newspaper, back when news wasn't on your phone. You're actually reading newspapers. And I'm sitting there in Fort Collins, and the cover of the Fort Collins newspaper was a picture of a priest who'd been an abuser in our own diocese. And I remember sitting there at breakfast with Lucky Charms in my mouth thinking, God, is this really what you want from me? Because this is what people think of when they think of a priest now. It was kind of I would say I was scared to enter into seminary. I was scared for what ministry might look like. And as I started telling people that I was accepted into seminary and I was going to be starting in the fall, I started getting little comments, biting comments about the Catholic Church or about those terrible priests. And you don't want to be one of those priests. And some really harsh comments. The one that sticks with me the most was last day of classes. I'd gotten along with this guy real well the whole school year. And as we're walking away from each other, he says, good luck in seminary, and don't go touch any little kids now. And it really settled in for me. Wow. But this is what people think when they think of the Catholic Church, when they think of Catholic priests. Now, thankfully, these last 15, 16 years or so have actually been rather easy for me. I've faced very little persecution. I haven't had anybody do anything too harmful for me. Uncomfortable conversations, plenty of them, on airplanes and that sort of thing. I get little angry letters to the Archbishop about once a week or so from somebody complaining about something about me, but that's little stuff, right? That's not even persecution. That's just the discomfort sometimes of being a Christian. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me. For me, that was a little bit of a taste of participating in that, but there's people in the world who have it so much worse. You look at China right now, and there's Chinese Catholics who are being forced in their own homes to take down images of Jesus to put up the image of the president. In their churches, they're being required to take down pictures of the Blessed Mother to put up images of the president. That's persecution. Look what's going on in Pakistan. You've got churches have to have someone on guard outside the church every time they have mass, keeping an eye out for people walking in with machine guns or explosives strapped to their chest. That's what's going on in Pakistan. That's persecution. And then Afghanistan. There's probably less than 12,000 Christians in Afghanistan. That is a severe minority. And the majority of them are converts from Islam, which is a crime punishable by death. That is one persecuted population in Afghanistan. And yet, they're not on the list to be allowed to come to the U.S. for safety right now. Not until the U.S. decides they're welcome to come. They face certain death by the Taliban right now. That's real persecution. They're fighting the fight. They're carrying their cross. We all have crosses to bear, but they're bearing the cross in a really unique way. And I think sometimes the comforts of this life that we have here kind of dull us to what really matters, to really prioritizing our lives around the most important things. Today we remember 20 years since the attacks on 9/11. There was a man who survived those attacks. His name was Suzhou John. Suzhou was on the 81st floor of the first tower, standing at a fax machine, when suddenly the whole building shook, and there's debris falling, and he falls to the ground, and the place is filled with smoke, and he can see fireballs out the window from the plane up above. He can smell the jet fuel. It took him almost an hour to get down the staircase all the way down to the street level. As he's getting away, the second building begins to collapse. So he and about 20 other people huddled together on the street for protection. They don't even know each other. They're just holding on to each other, and not all of them survived. He immediately called his wife, who worked in the second tower. But thankfully, she was running late that day, and she was still on the subway. She survived. They both survived the attacks that day. Now, in his own testimony, as he shares kind of surviving the Twin Towers, he talks about this big realization that his wife and he had about just where their priorities were in life. That they needed to reorder some things as they recognized 3,000 people had died that day. They recognized that they just had things out of order in their life. They were good people. They were Christian people. But they barely shared their faith with anybody. They were pursuing worldly things with worldly ambitions. Not all bad, but it really convinced them that they needed to make some changes. Now, a few years later, he became a minister. He became a Protestant minister. They had changed their life so much to put Jesus first and their family first. They learned to reprioritize. And maybe we had that same experience looking back at 9/11. I think a lot of us did, of recognizing it's a reminder for us that life is fragile. Everything we have is fragile and could crumble, could be attacked. It's a reminder of the spiritual battle of good and evil going on in our world. So hopefully it reminded us to reprioritize. And in some ways, I think we're still called to reprioritize, because in the last 20 years, we are probably more divided than we ever were. We're probably more distracted than we've ever been. And we are less focused on the most important things than we've ever been. It's time for our culture to reprioritize. We have to learn how to deny ourselves, take up our cross, and follow him. And for some reason, I think there's wisdom in Jesus putting them in that order. Deny yourself, take up your cross. He promises us we're all going to have a cross. Every walk of life, no matter where you live, no matter what time, you will have a cross in your life. But we have to deny ourselves to have the strength to carry the cross. I think that's why he put it in that order. I did taekwondo for many years, and every time you were going to test for a new belt, you had to prepare yourself, because you're going to have to break some boards, or you're going to have to break a brick or something like that. And so that's going to hurt. You're going to smash your hand through 2 inches of wood. That's going to hurt. So you would do something called forging. I remember sitting watching TV with a piece of wood in front of me and just smashing my hand into that wood. You're kind of like building up the tolerance to take on that physical experience of smashing my hand into wood. We called it forging. I think there's something of that we're supposed to do in the spiritual life. Deny ourselves in order to take up our cross. It's this forging of our soul. We have to tell our soul no sometimes so that we can say no and we can say yes to the right things. So we can deal with the cross when the cross comes. So we have the strength to carry it, which means we have to practice self-denial in the little things and the big things. It might mean that I have to say no to having dessert tonight. It might mean that I have to decide I'm going to stand in the long line at the grocery store, or I'm going to drive the speed limit and not a mile faster. The little ways that we practice denying ourselves now trains our soul to deal with the annoyances and the difficulties and even the persecutions that might come down the road. We need to practice denying ourselves and taking up our cross. That's where we get the abundant life. Do you want the abundant life that Jesus offers? It's a free gift, but it comes at a high cost.